back, everybody. I love this conversation that we've had. It's good stuff. Glad to know things are syncing and you're able to recognize it when you see it. It's awesome. Awesome stuff. So we're gonna get started with lesson 3. I'm like, is this lesson 3? This is lesson 3. It's going fast. And I'm like, so I always want to review the lessons because there's so much information on these things. And sometimes I think, maybe we just scratch the surface. And this is going to be that class. We're just scratching the surface. There's a lot of deeper stuff here. But I wanted to bring in some stuff that we might not have really honed in on in the last class, right? And so this is how we're going to tie it together for this class. So the first thing that I want to remind everybody is that the conscious mind is the gatekeeper for the subconscious mind. It's like your conscious mind is the objective or thinking mind. And like we said before, it has no memory. It only holds a thought at a time, for real. I know you guys think that you might multitask and you might have multiple thoughts going on at a time, but it's really only one thought at a time. And the way to prove this, and you can only do one thing with the brain at the time, by the way. If you try to speak and think about something different at the same time, it's almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I want you to think about what you ate for lunch today, or if you ate lunch, if what you ate in your last meal, how about that, in case you didn't eat lunch? And then at the same time, I want you to say your name out loud. So think about what you ate last, and then say your name out loud. Letitia.
Oh, I forgot what I ate for lunch. It's true.
What happens is once you start speaking, it cancels out the thought because all of your resources are going to the speaking. That's another thought. I have to think about saying my name. I have to engage a whole lot of things to move the muscles in my mouth and so forth. And so your brain automatically shifts. So you really and truly can only hold one thought at a time. Like we said, the conscious mind is very binary. It performs two functions, basically, and it accepts or rejects information, period, point blank. In making choices, it is accepting or rejecting information. It is a yes or no. It is a positive or negative thought process. And these decisions are based on assessments that the conscious mind does. And I call it putting things in compartments or categories. So it either compartmentalizes or categorizes any information that it receives. So he said it has no memory of its own. Its primary job is compartmentalizing and categorizing, but a part of that is interpretation. Good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no. That's that level of interpretation at the level of conscious mind. Then we said the methods by which it interprets and categorizes are feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuiting, right? Intuition. And we're going to touch back on intuition a little bit in this class because I know I threw a few folks off last time when I said intuition can't always be trusted. Excuse me. The reason that intuition can't always be trusted is there's a thing that they have labeled now called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the way that the brain tries to predict what is going to happen next. Because remember, the conscious mind doesn't like new stuff all that well, and the subconscious really is there to preserve life as it is, so it doesn't like new stuff all that well. And so it's always looking to explain what's happening in the moment, right? Confirmation bias aids in this process. It looks like something I've experienced in the past, and therefore it is the exact same thing. It is familiar to me. The reason confirmation bias is coming up to the forefront and being discussed a lot is because we are having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Confirmation bias feeds into our ability to include or exclude people based on familiarity. And that familiarity doesn't have to necessarily have anything to do with race, but do we think alike? Do we share the same interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so confirmation bias limits a lot of things. And I'm having to do some interesting things with the screens right this minute because my computer decided to do its own thing. Let's do this. Here we go. All right, so confirmation bias will often look like intuition. Oh, I know what's going to happen next, right? This person is this or this person is that. This situation is going to turn out like this. It's going to turn out like that because I've seen it before. The challenge with confirmation bias is that we automatically interpret what we're seeing the same way it happened in the past. For example, have you ever been looking at a document with somebody and seeing one thing, seeing the words in a particular way, and then that person sees those same words in another way? You are convinced that those words mean X, and they are convinced that the words mean Y. Confirmation bias feeds into validating what I want to see in the words. You all, in order to overcome confirmation bias and really step into intuition, you have to silence the mind. You have to silence the subconscious mind too. The conscious and the subconscious mind both have to be quieted. And you have to really just observe and trust and stay curious about the direction that things are going in. Because if not, you step into telling a thing what it is. Does that make sense? Am I confusing you? Okay. And okay, so I'll use race, but actually image as an example. We down here in the South, right? You know, for a long time, I had a lot of negative associations with the term word redneck, right? Redneck meant something very negative to me as far as it related to racial interactions. Rednecks, in my mind, I could see the KKK and the rebel flag in a shotgun. That was redneck to me. So whenever I encounter somebody who embraced the concept of redneck, that's what immediately crossed my mind. And we actually, on Robins Air Force Base, we actually did this event and they wanted to do games with it. And they called the games the Redneck Games. And I was blown away. I'm like, there is no way in the world that I'm participating in the coordination of the Redneck Games because this is the image that I had in my mind, right? But then I encountered people who redneck meant something entirely different than what I had perceived. Their understanding of redneck had to do with the land and farming and being outside and working and toiling and just being good, wholesome people, kind of salt of the earth people. Granted, I did convince them to change the title from the Redneck Games. But it did aid in me seeing the term redneck from a different perspective, right? I had confirmation bias around that term. And I had to let that go in order to embrace something new. Because every time I thought about the term redneck, I cringed. And that caused the resistance to moving forward with what they were doing. And I became kind of hard to deal with in that process because I'm very firm in that. We do not need to call these the redneck games. And then what happens is you encounter people who embody that thought process once or twice, right? And so your brain says, yep, that's a redneck. Yep. This association of the KKK and the rebel flags and all of that validates my belief that rednecks are negative. So that when you encounter a new person who might look like that same person, dress like that same person, maybe even care, the rebel flag means many things to many people, right? But it is wrong of me to assume that because this person has on overalls and a hat and might have a shotgun in the back of their truck, they just came from hunting, right? Just came from their hunters. And they might have a rebel flag that they're going to be X. They're not going to be any different from the past experiences. That is confirmation bias, right? We assume that they're going to be that way. And then we end up creating tension between ourselves and that individual. And then we affirm what we already know to be true. We don't see them as who they are. We don't see them as anything different than what we already believe to be true. Why are you laughing? What's the laugh?
I just read Jeff's message.
Sorry, I had to add a little humor. Sorry about being late. I said it depends on what they're hunting with whatever they're hunting with the shotgun depends on whether you should think that way.
I didn't see the message because I said, but very true. Very much depends on what they're hunting. Let's hope it's just deer. And I'm still not all loving of people hunting Bambi. That's still a heartache for me, but that's my issue. And I have tried deer meat and it was pretty tasty. So I have to throw that kind of killed that too. So that's why intuition might fail us sometimes. That confirmation bias comes into play, causes our intuition, we think it's intuition. I won't say it causes our intuition to be wrong because truthfully, true intuition is never really wrong. But confirmation bias can look like intuition. It can look a lot like intuition when really it's just our trauma speaking, our past negative experiences speaking, etc. All right. So back to this conscious mind. The process of interpretation in the conscious mind happens quickly, and it is based on these methods that we have. And if it feels bad, then it is bad. This is the challenge, because if it feels good, no matter how bad for us it is, it's good. It's always good. And we're going to have a hard time letting go of that bad habit because it feels so good. We talk about this feeling ability in metaphysics, right? Anytime you're trying to manifest something in your life, you want to bring in the feeling capacity of mind in order to manifest it. If you can't feel it, then you have difficulty in manifesting, right? The reason that feeling capacity is brought into the manifestation conversation is because it is so powerful. It is the driver of our conscious mind, and what we feel strongly about, we are passionate about. And what we are passionate about, we are excited about. And what we are excited about, we repeat over and over and over again until we get the achieved results.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The manifestation process, I've heard it used in certain settings. I'm not sure. Can you describe how you're using it? Like manifesting the positivity in your life, or what? Just help me there.
So say you want to, I'll give a perfect example because I did it. When I
Okay.
was in school, I was a non-traditional student when I was in college. And I would start college, I was a single mom. I had got divorced and was starting a new life. I would start college, it would get hard. I would say, oh, I'm too broke, it's too painful, I'm quit, go back to work. I would go to work, then it was, I'm not making enough money. I really need that degree to get the jobs that I need. Let me go back to college. And I did that for a long time, right? When I finished college, what I started doing was visualizing myself graduate,
Okay.
feeling myself moving across the floor and that sense of achievement that I would have once I completed the degree. Okay. Now, when I had 2 years out, I had to change that, right? Because it was too far away. It was causing me problems. So I had to break it up in chunks. And I would say, I want to get straight A's this semester, right? And so then I would look forward to being on the dean's list. I would think about how it felt to be successful in knocking out straight A's, right? And I would celebrate that when it was accomplished. So
Right.
all of that's manifestation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had heard it used in other terms, and that's why I wanted to know.
Yeah. You can manifest negative stuff too. But yeah, and most often we do. But from a positive perspective, when you're trying to manifest something that is important to you, that feeling component is absolutely necessary. You have to feel yourself
Yeah, I
achieving it.
just heard it used in other religious kinds of experiences for people in terms of manifestation of physical objects and that kind of thing. And that's why I was
what she was talking about.
Okay.
that was what I was asking. Yeah, that's where I was asking.
Gotcha. All right. And I gotta teach this class again. Heart-centered metaphysics. You learn a lot about manifestation. It's a very powerful class.
Yes.
The book is great. We did it for a year. I don't know that I have that level of investment. It's a whole year's worth of a class. But if you get the book, it is a great book. And I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it and the author does classes on his book too. So you might be able to find a class. What was his name? Paul? What was
Hasselbeck.
Paul Hasselbeck. Yes, Paul Hasselbeck.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot about manifestation from the metaphysical perspective. Honestly, I think that's just me. I don't know about manifesting stuff out of thin air. I don't know about that.
Well,
It's not there. It's not magic.
It's not magic, exactly.
Not bad.
Pulling rabbits out of hats. All right, so if it feels good, then it is good. Then you repeat it and you're kind of hard pressed to change it, right? So that feeling our interpretation process can often work against us, but it mostly works for us. And I'm going to touch on this again later on in the class. Trauma, and this is a hard one to accept for some people, but trauma is created in the conscious mind through the process of interpretation, and it is stored in the subconscious mind until we choose to evict it from our closet. It's the skeleton in our closet, right? And we don't want to open it until we get ready to open that door. So that's tying it all together from last week. Are there any questions about what we covered last week before I move on? Okay. All right. So today we're finally going to get to something I've been talking about for a minute. And that's the Dark Night of the Soul. I think I was trying to introduce the Dark Night of the Soul in lesson 2, but just couldn't get there yet. So we're going to continue tying in the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, but this time we're going to add the body on top of it and talk about how they work together and how they're connected and why it's so important to do this work. And then I named this little section, Potholes in Your Lawn. And we're going to talk about holes in your aura. And you'll see why I named it Potholes in Your Lawn later on. And then we're going to tackle a tough subject. For a lot of people, this makes people very uncomfortable, but there's absolutely no reason to be uncomfortable with this topic. Demons, principalities, and powers in high places. Got to deal with them. Got to get rid of the movie version of what a demon is and step into the truth of how our demons manifest in our lives, right? Then I'm going to talk a little bit about energetic transference or energy transference. How many are familiar with that term? Energy transference? Okay, good deal, Jen. So we'll talk about that a little bit and the different ways that energy is transformed. So, hey, James. And then we'll move on into the Dark Night of the Soul. All right. So now we're doing this body, mind, spirit connection, or the body, mind, soul connection, right? Kind of, sort of. We'll get into the soul part later on, our spirit part. As I mentioned before, the conscious mind is the gatekeeper for the subconscious. It processes information through feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuition. It determines what is sent to the subconscious. And like we said before, this happens in a matter of seconds, almost instantaneously. Equally fast is the response time of the subconscious. While the conscious mind is the gatekeeper of the subconscious is the gatekeeper of the body, right? The subconscious mind controls everything that the body does. And we think about it, we know it, right? That the subconscious mind controls your heart rhythm. It controls your blood flow. It controls your breathing, but it also controls your behavioral response system. How many of you knew that already? That most of the time your knee-jerk reactions, how you move in the world, are coming from your subconscious memory. It's not coming from the conscious mind. And it uses the data that's been previously stored to respond to current situations. Again, that's why change is so hard. And I found this interesting fact about the subconscious in the American Psychology Association document. And it said this: studies in the field of psychology on how the brain works indicate that experiences we have shape the way we think and act, especially those in our early childhood. Although you do not consciously remember most of your life data, the unconscious data in your body, they say head, I'm going to say body, influences 90 to 95% of your behaviors. Yeah, so wow, that's a lot. That is a lot to be on autopilot. 90 to 95%. Your subconscious mind also practices homeostasis in the mental realm by keeping you thinking and acting in a manner consistent with what you've done and said in the past. Your subconscious mind causes you to emotionally and physically feel comfortable. And whenever you feel you attempt to do something new, it's going to make you uncomfortable. Because what it's designed to do is change any patterns, change any behavior that is in contradiction to the patterns that it is used to performing before. It's like holding your breath, right? You can consciously say, I'm going to hold my breath for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Guess what's going to happen? It's not going to happen unless you train to do this. If you're like me, you'll probably get a good 30 seconds out of the deal. But unless you train hard to do this, your body is automatically going to respond. Your mouth is going to open. You're going to move your hand from your nostrils and you're going to breathe, because the subconscious mind is just that strong, just that powerful, and always wants to preserve life. So now, when the sense of fear and discomfort are present in your body, they are psychological signs that the subconscious is being activated. The thing about the subconscious is this: it's been working to establish the behavior and patterns that are currently your life in the background without your conscious awareness, long before you ever notice any of the feelings. Long before you ever notice any feelings. And so when we say that our bodies are just doing what we've always been programmed to do, that means that if we're programmed to lose all the time, then losing will be the pattern of your life. If we're programmed to win all the time, then winning will be the pattern of your life, right? If you're programmed to roll over and play dead, be a doormat, right? Then people will walk all over you all the time. You got to do some extra work, a heavier lift to get out of that. Now, it gets even deeper when we talk about healthcare, right? If you're programmed to believe that the doctor knows more about your body than you, which the majority of us are, then whatever the doctor pronounces over you health-wise, your subconscious mind says that's correct, and your body starts to respond in that manner. And this is why it's so important when things like that happen to knock it out, to delete it, and say there's another possibility. And I'm going to tell you, that is almost like the battle of all battles, right? When you are trying to shift your mindset from a traditional hard and fast rule, the doctor says you have 6 months to live, right? To mentally fight against it and say, never mind, I'm not listening to that. I'm going to live as long as I want to. It's almost like fighting against the world, because the world is telling you, oh my God, you're going to die in 6 months. There's a movie called The Homecoming, I believe it is, and the character, a young lady named Awkwafina is the main character. And she goes home to China to see her grandmother who has cancer. It's on Amazon. You may have seen it before. Great movie if you haven't. But in China, they don't tell the person who's sick that they have an illness. They tell the family. And it is perceived to be a duty of the family to keep that information from the person who is sick. Okay? So the whole story hinges upon them going home to say their final goodbyes to grandma, because grandma's dying of cancer, but nobody can tell grandma. Absolutely hilarious story. They create this fake wedding event so that everybody can see and hug grandmother, but it's not an event, right? So they create this whole illusion. They never tell grandma what she has. Although, grandma is aware, but grandma is older Chinese, and so she's doing some things. She's doing some natural remedies and things like that. Grandma was supposed to live less than a year. The movie, which was based on a true story, when it came out, grandma was still living. Grandma was still living. And so our thoughts have the ability to really, really impact our mind. What we have stored in our subconscious about what is right and what is wrong, because I could see you guys' faces when I said that they would keep the information from grandma. Everybody's like, oh my God, why would I do that? That's what everybody, I'm watching you guys. That's what everybody's face did. Why is that so? Because in America, we believe it's your right to know what's happening with you, right? We're gonna fight and we're gonna push and we're gonna dig and we're gonna ask and we're gonna wanna know all the details. That's why we have the type of conversations we have with our doctors to get as much information as possible. And then we're gonna go on WebMD and we're gonna search it or we're gonna Google it and we're gonna get even more information about that's how we're trained to be. It's deeply embedded in our nature, right? But over there, they're like, it's not that important.
I had to hide it from my mother because she said if she had cancer, she didn't want to know. And so that was very much, fortunately, she couldn't hear real good. So she missed a lot of conversations. But yeah, she didn't want to know because she knew that if she had cancer, she was just going to die.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a quality of life thing, right?
Yeah, but sometimes, people almost see it like a death sentence. Because I knew this this man, he farmed all of his life. He wasn't feeling well. He went to the doctor. The doctors told the man he had 6 to 12 months to live. He was dead in a matter of 2 months.
Yeah.
It was almost like he lost hope.
He lost the fight.
That's the way he dealt with it. He just gave up.
Yep. I'm gonna die anyhow. Why should I?
I'm gonna die anyway. Yeah. So
yeah. But that's because he saw the doctor as the expert.
That's right.
Authority on life.
And that's right. And he was of a generation where the doctors were the experts. I mean, they knew all. They were practically God,
Yeah.
And to question it or trying to say, what can I do to, have more time with my grandchildren, or that was not even in his realm of thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Shirley?
No, that's pretty much was the situation with my mother. And my mother would be 110 if she was alive. But is that she just didn't. She knew that if she knew that, she wouldn't try.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Was our challenge trying to keep it from her.
Yeah, yeah. So the things that we learn from childhood really do play a great role in our lives. I love the movement that we are now. Granted, I know we're driving the doctors crazy because we don't always take their advice anymore. But sometimes exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Oh well.
Now you guys can probably imagine I am a patient nightmare to any physician. But I tell them that when I meet them, I said, I will be your patient nightmare. If you're not up for that, it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
That's how it should be. I negotiate with my doctor. It's like, okay, the blood work looks this way today. Give me a couple months, we'll try it again. And I promise you, every single time when I come back, it's like it's not there. I don't need any medication. I can fix this on my own. That's my motto. Right? And I'm the same way about surgery. It's going to be the last ditch effort for you to cut on me. If I can help it, we're not cutting. Right? That's just me. And so far, so good.
You're basically healthy. You're basically healthy. So, but that's not always the case with.
Right. Yeah.
There's certain things that you just have to do.
And when you get to the point where you have to do it, then you have to do it, right?
Right.
But as long as I don't have to, I'm gonna
If you
look
don't
for
have
options.
If you don't have to.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, let's move on. So I told you guys that I was going to explain the title Potholes in My Lawn. First of all, we are celebrating 50 years of the creation of hip hop, and I love hip hop. I grew up in this, and so it's very much a part of my life. And there was a group called De La Soul, and they were kind of the woke rap artists back in the day. And they made a song called Potholes in My Lawn, and it was about people sowing negativity into their life as they were producing their music and things like that, and how they just stuck a daisy, that people would try to dig the pothole, and they would, and so they would come back and plant a daisy in the pothole to cover it up. It's like, we're not going to let this negativity affect us. We're going to keep on doing what we're doing. And so I love this song for this reason, and it applies to what we're about to talk about. We introduced the concept that the mind was all over the body, right? And we introduced the chakras in the first class. Well, those chakras emit energy. Every part of us, we're energetic beings. And if you did a night vision goggles, you could see the energy, the redness that comes off of a person. That is the energy emitting from their bodies, because we are vibrating. Our whole body vibrates on a regular basis. We're just a bunch of molecules bouncing up against each other, right?
Right.
So that movement of those molecules bouncing up against each other creates an energetic field. And in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in a lot of spiritual teachings, they refer to that energetic field as the aura, right? And the aura is your first point of contact with the world, and it can often say more about you than your words do. Keep in mind that your chakras are the storage centers of all the information of your life. So if they have the record of everything that's happened to you in this life and potentially the lives before, then they impact your aura because they feed into that energy field. And so that energy field says a lot about you. And by the way, they have a technique now called Kirlian photography, where you can go and get a picture of your aura. Debbie Johnson here has the capability of doing those if you're ever curious about doing them, but that's in Byron. So, but you can see your aura, you can see the colors in your aura, because they should look like a rainbow. Under many, a healthy aura will look like a rainbow. And they say that it's a bubble that extends above you, beneath you, in front of you, behind you, and to either side of you. And it's like your energy skin. And sometimes it expands far away from you, and sometimes it hugs your body close and tightly hovers inches above the skin. But for most of us, it extends about 2 to 3 feet outside of our skin. The auric field, as it is known, can be damaged. A clear sign that you have a hole in your aura is a constant, strong, recurring emotion like anger or grief or fear. You may also struggle with intense shyness and anxiety. A hole is indicated by holding yourself stuck in that emotion, and you are inclined to sink into depression. That's when you've got these holes. And these holes factor into what we call energetic leaks. Energetic leaks. And they say not only might you experience depression, but you might also experience a lack of motivation because you've got holes in your auras. So how can your aura be damaged, right? We know up front, psychological trauma. And when I use the word trauma, I don't want you to think of the worst thing that could ever happen, right? Because yes, seeing somebody get shot is traumatic, but also seeing an accident on the side of the road where people are deeply hurt that you're not involved in can be traumatic. For me, tell people all the time, I had PTSD from having a snake in the house, and opening the door. I couldn't open doors for a long time without fear, because one time I opened the door of my house and a snake came out and went right past me. Right? So trauma can be small things too, because there's some people who say, oh, you had a snake in the house. And, for me, I don't like snakes at all. So it was like, oh my gosh. And of course, my brain started doing the what ifs. What if I had been in the house and the snake was in front of the door waiting to get out and I couldn't open the door? One way in, one way out. It was an apartment. So then it became bigger and bigger and bigger than the situation was. And the next thing you know, I'm checking every time I open the door. I still check to this day. I still check when I open the door, going outside, to make sure there's nothing hanging around the door. That is PTSD all day long, because prior to that event, I didn't do things like that. Prior to that event. So when I say trauma, don't think of it as the worst thing that could happen. Think of it as that thing that changes who you are, so much so that your behavior is modified as a result of it in a negative way. Okay? We change in a positive way and we say that's evolution. But when we change in a negative way, we call it trauma. Okay? Relationships can be traumatic events. I never want to date anybody again. I never want to get married again. The minute you say, I will never, that's when you recognize that you've had some trauma around this situation. Okay. All right. Substance abuse. Substance abuse can cause holes in your aura, especially addiction and dependency on mind-altering drugs and stimulants and depressions. They impact your aura field. Also, physical problems can impact your auric field, but this one is like all of them, by the way, or which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Because if you have an emotional problem that isn't dealt with, it creates a hole in your aura, which opens up the door for negative energy that creates a physical ailment. It's all tied together, right? So an emotional trauma, undealt with, not kicked out, creates that hole. You don't repair the hole. Then it gets in your auric field, and it looks like this little dot right here, a little dark spot in your auric field. But then it can grow as you contemplate it, remember it, make it bigger than it is, kind of like me and the snake. Because the snake didn't try to attack me at all, by the way. I need to say that it was just walked right past me. It's like, hey, I got to get out. But I made it bigger than it was, and it wasn't poisonous. And so then it becomes this dirty stuff in your auric field. But then it attaches to your body and begins to cause the body to break down, right? I don't want to make it seem like there are little things floating around coming into your auric field. These are like, the best way I know how to describe these are thoughts, emotions, energy, right? That does not belong. It's like getting a piece of dirt in a clam or an oyster. Now, in an oyster, it creates a pearl, right? But in us, it creates a tumor. It creates a tumor. So something to think about. The other thing, and I would say that this is a strong indicator that your auric field has some leaks in it, is sensitivity to other people. Whenever I run into folks who just can't be around certain people, I'm like, your auric field is not strong. You need to do some self-work, right? Because you've got some baggage, as they say, that causes you to be greatly impacted by somebody else's experience or somebody else's energy. Now, people who are highly intuitive, or empaths, as they say, everybody knows the term empath? Yeah. Okay. Empaths can feel other people's energies to the point where they understand their pain, right? They actually experience the pain. What empaths have to do to keep their auric field together is to move that pain out, right? They feel it, but they recognize that it's not theirs. It doesn't belong to them. And they they release it, as we were saying earlier, Kathy. They release that energy and put it where it needs to be. One of the practices that we used to do in Reiki class, one of the things that I was taught to do was that anytime I did energy work on somebody and practicing Reiki, I needed to do some symbolic motion of release. And for us, it was dusting your hands. When you finish the session, you always dust your hands, break the connection, break the energy, because it's not my work. It's not my energy. It's not my problem. I can empathize. I can have compassion. I can understand and comprehend, but it is not mine. So you have to break the connection. And if you find yourself having that experience of taking on other people's problems, other people's emotions, etc., maybe you need to start doing this. Even the intentional act of breaking the connection is enough, right? It seems simple, but it is a mind thing. We are consciously, intentionally breaking the connection. It's not mine. Okay? So these are the things that both challenge you as an individual, cause you to have energy leaks, cause you to be drained, cause you to lack motivation, cause you to become stagnant, coming from your aura. But these are also the same things when they're internal that cause your auric field to be broken. People with high self-esteem have strong auric fields. There's an interesting thing that happens. There's some people who are overly confident. You ever watch what was America's Got Talent or some of those shows where people audition, and they'll always have that person on there that comes on and they'll say, I know I can sing. I got the best voice. I've been singing since I was so-and-so age. And then they get up there and they sound absolutely awful. And you're like, holy crap, where did they come from? And then they don't get selected. They leave and they're like, but I'm still the greatest. Now, that's not always the best mindset to have. Sometimes you do need to take some instructions and some constructive criticism. However, there are certain things in your life where you've got to be that dogmatic with your self-esteem. You have to have enough confidence in yourself, who you are, why you are, that nobody else can come in and tear you down, no matter what, right? And that's what it looks like to have a strong auric field. You've done the work to heal all the limiting beliefs, all the negativity, and release those past experiences that cause you harm, and build up that inner strength, that inner positivity, that inner knowing of who you are. Building up the I am, that's the best way I know to put it. Build up the I am so that nobody can permeate that. And I say this as if it's easy, but there will be days where your I am is strong, right? And there will be days where your I am is not so strong. the I am will switch and be am I instead of I am is am I. You know? So, but there are a lot of things that feed into that. Proper rest. One of the things I've noticed about myself is I am a blubbering mess. Everybody overwhelms me, gets on my nerves. I can't handle anything when I've not had enough sleep. So proper rest is one of the tools for standing in your I am versus the am I, right? Protecting your mind is some of the things that feed into the I am or the am I. When we watch a lot of negativity, and we're sensitive, by the way, because I've always had this challenge, and that's why I'm very mindful of what I watch on television, because it gets in my aura, it gets in my spirit, and it causes me to be weaker. So you have to be protected. Even the words that other people speak to you, you have to be protective of what you choose to allow people to say to you, because it can impact you and change how you feel about yourself, how you feel about what you're doing, everything. So you almost have to be dogmatic with it. Any questions or thoughts about that? Go ahead, Jeff.
How do you know? Is there an objective way to measure if, like, the hubris humility challenge? Like I often wonder, am I full of myself? Should I be humble? I don't know if I'm overdoing it. I don't know if I'm being serious or being funny. I don't know. I don't know.
Remind me of that old song, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect
Covered in every way. I say it I sing that all the time. How'd you know? So, and Ruben, one of my coworkers said, I said, what was the first impression you had when I walked in? He goes, I didn't like you, Jeff. I thought you were cocky. But by the time you left that day, you're just confident. And I
Yeah.
was like, how do you know what balance to strike between being confident, which is typically a good thing, but cocky is not?
Yes. Interpretation is a beast. That's all I can say. That to me, I've met you for the first time. Absolutely love you the first time I met you. Didn't have any problem. Yes, always. And so,
Feelings mutual.
right. And so I would say that that problem was more of that person. Humility is the recognition that there is something greater than you at work, that everything is not your doing, that you were to have humility and to be humble means that you recognize that while you may be very skilled in a particular thing like mathematics or something like that, it was a gift. You were born with it, right? It was something greater than yourself that was implanted in you. And so you walk in confidence, but you don't boast over everybody else and say, oh, I'm so much smarter than you, and you have to work so much harder than me. No, I was born with it. I'm very humble about the fact that I am a pretty good public speaker, right? I've had people say that I was a gifted public speaker, right? And I'm like, it was a gift. Didn't earn it, didn't work for it. I take no major credit for it. I'm glad that I have it. But I understand people who are challenged in that area, and I don't lord it over them and try to make it seem like I'm better than them. So I don't have any problem with your walk. I think more people need to be able to walk like you, Jeff, because confidence does matter. Mom, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of times when we got to ask ourselves, are we cocky? And another word for that is, and I find it in a lot of people who act cocky, what really is the problem that they have is arrogance. They arrogantly think that it's all about them. And like you just said, most of the time, if we could just realize I didn't bring myself into this world, I didn't give me the knowledge that I had, because some things you just know. You
Yeah.
never went to school for it. You just know. People who are good in math, I don't care how much they went to school, they just knew math.
Yeah.
However it was presented to them, they just grasped it and they could hold on to it. But a lot of people who could grasp it and hold on to it, flaunted it. And a lot of times the reason they flaunted it is to make someone else look small.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem with whether or not you're cocky or arrogant.
Yeah.
Or do you set out every day to make someone else feel? They don't even have to look like, but feel like that something inside of them feel diminished because you got this attitude that you're it and a bag of chips.
Yeah.
You know you're the everything.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, and someone see you as something other than the real you, it's on them. Always be about presenting the real self.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
I'll add to that the people that she's describing, they're not confident at all.
no,
They are the most insecure people you will ever run up on. They give a false bravado, right?
mhm.
An impression of confidence, but it's
Thank
not
you.
true confidence. Because
Thank
if you really get to talking to them and get to trust me, I can pull some interesting things out of people. You learn that they are very, very, very much lacking.
Insecure.
Insecure, that's the word.
Insecure.
Confident people empower other people to feel the same thing. And I know you do that. I know you do.
It's funny, the empath that my job, that was my boss,
Yeah.
she told me one day, she sensed I was being falsely humble, like too much.
Mhm.
And she said, don't ever dim your light to make other people feel good.
There you go.
Don't rub it in, don't rub your super, because we all have superpowers, whether
Yes.
we figure them out or not. We all have them.
Yeah.
And don't rub someone else's nose in your superpower
Yeah.
because they don't have it, because they have one you don't have. So,
Yeah.
but don't dim your light just to make someone else feel good.
That's
I
it.
thought that was good advice.
That was
Yeah.
good advice because other people's feelings are their responsibility.
Yeah. And another thing is I like a scripture that says, with everything that lies within you, live peaceably with all people. And so what you do, if you know you're good at something and this person is not, try to pull them up. All the time you can't do it, but with what lies within you, you try to do that and help that person that don't know as much as you do, don't have the confidence that you do, or feel down about themselves. Try to pull them. If you don't pull them up a one step, that's better than they were when you met them. Always leave a person making them feel like they just met someone who was great and they made them feel like they were great.
Yeah.
That's how you get past whether or not you're cocky or whether or not you're arrogant. That's how you get past that. And the way you leave them, if they can't see what you were trying to do, it's on them. It's not on you. You did everything you could.
Thanks, Mama. That's great advice.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on these potholes in this auric field and confidence? I love that this conversation went to confidence.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to these demons, principalities, powers in high places. And I put under here, what is the state of your mind?
Ah.
And the reason I put what is the state of your mind is when I looked up demons in the metaphysical Bible, it said that demons or evil spirits are conditions of the mind, a state of mind, a state of consciousness that has been developed because the creative power of man, our ability to interpret and tell stories about what is happening to us, has been used in an unwise or ignorant way. And if in thought or in word you are using your creative power in an ignorant way, you are bringing forth an ego or a personality of like character. And the mind builds states of consciousness that become established in the brain and the body. That is from the metaphysical interpretation. And then I found another quote. Buddhism has always been interesting when it came to demons. A lot of people think demons is only a Christian concept, but it's found in a lot of things. This quote from Yogini Mahid Labdrum. I'm probably murdering his name, but one of the great sages of Buddhism. He says that as long as there is an ego, there are demons. When there is no more ego, there are no more demons, right? This is about your mindset. And I put on this slide a picture of Jesus with this boy. It's a story out of Mark 9. And every time I hear this story, I think about our state of mind. And it says that one of the men in the crowd, Jesus is walking through a crowd, said, "Teacher, I brought my son so you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit and that won't let him talk. And whenever the spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid." And then Jesus asked this man a question. He said, how long has this been happening? And it says, since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into the fire and into the water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us if you can. Whenever I see this story in the book of Mark, I immediately see the image of someone filled with trauma. Not just a little bit of trauma, but specifically PTSD. And let me be clear, PTSD is not a veteran's disorder. Many people experience PTSD. And there are multiple levels to their impact. This is probably the level of extreme PTSD, right? The demons that we create in our minds are created by interpretation process. Remember, the thinking, feeling, sensing, intuiting process. How our brain says good, bad, yes, no, right, wrong, evil, righteous, is what begins to create the demons. Now, there's an amazing thing that happens in our mind. It's called imagination. And our imagination can do the most amazing things with this interpretation process. We can make it big or we can make it small. We can make it look like a little bunnies and unicorns, or we can make it look like a big monster. Think about it. From small ages, children see monsters in the closet. There's no monster.
Under the bed.
Under the bed, right?
Yeah.
The imagination is taking the situation that they're uncomfortable with and creating demons. We do the same thing. But most of the time, our demons are a direct result of the things that we have experienced.
Did you notice in this story that the father did not say he was born this way?
No, yes, exactly.
He did not say he was born this way. So this is something that came on later.
Later, something happened to the child.
Yeah, something happened.
Yeah. When I think about this boy falling into the fire and falling into the water, water in metaphysics is always tied with emotions, and emotions are tied to feelings. So imagine falling into a deep feeling of sorrow, and that sorrow threatening to overtake you and kill the spirit within you. Fire is often associated with anger and destructive nature. So imagine the anger taking over and threatening to destroy you. to me, in looking at this story, I often see the cycle of grief. Anybody remember the cycles of grief? The stages of grief? If you don't, I got them for you. Anger is one of the cycles of grief, and so is depression. If you ever had to grieve about anything, put yourself in the story and imagine how your grief has held you captive and how it's threatened to destroy you sometimes. People have been so depressed that they've not been able to get up and go to work. People have been so angry that they disconnect from the world as a result of grief. And I want to remind you, and by the way, I put a serious picture and a funny picture. The picture right here says my experience of grief. The squiggly lines. I start out, I'm moving, I do okay, I get messed up, I go back down to the beginning. And that's often how grief is. We loop many times before we ever return to meaningful life, as they say.
It's very non-linear.
It is non-linear. Good Lord. If it was linear, life would be so much easier. We could move through it. I mean, we know these things. I don't know anybody here that hasn't heard of the cycle of grief at some point in their life, right?
I would go to bargaining and say, how do I get to the end? Let me just skip.
How do I skip it, right? But it's not linear. You get to bargaining and then fall right back into shock and denial. Easily. And I want to make it clear that grief can come for many, many reasons. It's not just associated with death and dying, or transitioning, as I like to say it. I've known people to experience grief when they lost a job. I've known people who experienced grief when they got divorced. People who experienced grief when life didn't look like what they expected it to. That's some powerful grief. I've had to work with people who are struggling to look at life in a different way because they had this set notion of what life was supposed to be, and their life didn't turn out that way. And now they have to let it go. Letting go of a dream is grief. So all of us have experienced grief at some point. The reason this grief ties so closely for me into these concepts of demons and principalities in high places is there's a movie called Journey to the West. And I hate that Anjana is not here today because she could contribute greatly to this conversation. It is a story from traditional Buddhist teachings, and it's a story of the Monkey King. It's a Chinese myth. And the Monkey King, it says that the Monkey King was sat on by Buddha for years. And when it finally got free from Buddha sitting on him, he started on a path to enlightenment. And on his journey to the West, to India, to where Buddhism really kind of started out. We always think China with Buddhism, but it's really more India. He's journeying to the West from China to get the sacred teachings. And he encounters demons along the way. Every demon in this movie, The Journey of the West, that he encountered had grief associated with it. The demon was a human who had fallen into grief and gotten stuck. One demon became the demon of the water, so they were just filled with sadness. One demon was just angry, and so it was all of them tried to kill the Monkey King as he came around. But as the Monkey King battled them, it was a process of healing, right? It looked like a battle, but they were really working through these emotions, these negative thoughts, these limiting beliefs, and the demon would return to their human form and follow the Monkey King on the journey. Many times we look like we're possessed by demons because we change the way that we live. We change the way that we relate to people. We're mean, we're hateful, we're spiteful, even nasty sometimes. But some of the nastiest people have some of the deepest hurt. Yeah, they're just stuck in it and they can't move. And nobody can point them in the direction of healing. Or maybe they're just not ready to heal sometimes. Some people, again, anger feeds the ego, right? We talked about that earlier. But as the quote, the great sage says, as long as there is ego, there's a demon. When there is no demon, when there's no ego, there is no demon. And so when our ego stops being fed by our grief, our anger, our sadness, then we can move on and return to a meaningful life. So when you see people who are stuck like that, just know that this is a part of the process. They've created a demon and they don't know how to get free of it. It is not The Exorcist. Let me just say that out loud. If I can help you eliminate the concept of the image in your mind of somebody's head spinning around and then spitting out pea soup, I will have done my job and accomplished my mission for the day. And demons don't look like a little devil with a pitchfork, right? They just don't. There are innermost hurts, traumas, negativity that we refuse to let go of. And this is why the work of healing is so important. This is why. All right. To prove my point, for those of you who come from a Christian tradition, I know I pulled a lot of Buddhism and metaphysics, so we're going to pull out just some straight up Christian scripture, straight out of the Bible. For we wrestle, for we do, I know it like this. I say it like this, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. What we are fighting at all times is not another person. I hear people say, oh, that's a demon right there, referring to another person. This not another person, that's a demon, right? But it is a way of thinking. The high places in our lives are our thoughts that occupy our mind, that occupy our consciousness, that occupy the subconscious, the spiritual realm. And those are the things that we have to battle in order to be whole, in order to find peace, in order to find joy and abundant life, right? Those are the things that we have to fight against to be a true expression of our God self, right? To be the true I am. So it's in every teaching. In every teaching, that this is our work. All right, so we're moving on. Any comments or questions about that before I move on to energetic transference? All right. Pull up the time. When we talk about energetic transference, I want us to get out of the mindset, because a lot of people think a demon jumping off of me and jumping off of you. No. A little mean looking monkey demons jumping off my back and getting onto yours. Nope. It's much more subtle than that. And this is why it's so easy to get caught up in, right? And y'all know me and television have a love-hate relationship. I grew up watching a whole lot of television, but I also know the level of energetic transference that takes place with television. This is why you get so glued to the TV, because the broadcasters are transferring energy through images, through sound. And what we allow to come into our minds takes on life itself within us. It gets embedded into our subconscious and it becomes a part of who we are. Remember, 90 to 95% of our behavior is directly tied to what's embedded in our subconscious. And so it becomes important to be mindful about the energy transference from social media, from television, from anything that can put in, even a book. Oh my gosh, one of the most powerful experiences I had learning wise was when I learned that I can get so caught up in a book that I begin to take on the emotion of the character in the book. The name of the book was Disappearing Acts. And it was a challenging story, right? Of a woman's experience in a relationship. And I read it quickly. I got into it. I read it probably in 3 days, but it took me another 3 days to shake off the energy of that book.
Yeah.
It was so well written and so descriptive that I could feel it. I was experiencing what she experienced. And so I had to shake that off and recognize that it wasn't my energy. It didn't belong to me. Right? That's energetic transference. The other thing is that people have the ability to do that too. You know, certain people come and they speak to you in a way that causes you to experience their energy. They suggest things. It's like brainwashing, the power of suggestion. They suggest things to you that get in your spirit and stick with you. And you could be walking around wondering why you're angry when you have no legitimate reason to be angry. Why you're sad when your life is perfectly fine, right? Why you're thinking negatively about this person or that person when you have no problem with them, right? So an energetic transference has happened. And we need to be mindful. This goes back to keeping your aura closed, keeping the holes out of your aura, because the better, the healthier your aura is, the less likely this energetic transference happens. Any questions?
Letitia, could this also be something caused by the people that we hang out with?
Oh,
I've had some friends in my life who talk negatively all of the time. And it would be so bad until you would start feeling it on the inside of you. And then it would just be so irritating until sometimes it would literally make you ill.
yeah.
You know, and so the thing that we have to do is guard against allowing those things to come into our lives so they won't get transferred over to us, or we won't pick up on them, or however you want to verbalize it, you know, so that we don't take on that energy.
Yeah, we have to break the connection, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily physically. I'm never a component for running away from people. I always say that when you encounter people who disrupt your energy to that level, your job is to figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Heal your aura, right? and strengthen your aura so that you're no longer affected by them. But doing the conscious disconnection from that situation, disconnection from their conversation, can actually keep you from being drained in that way. There are some people, they call them energy vampires. There are some people who will suck the life out of you if
Yeah.
you let them, but you have the choice to not let them. One of the things I had to learn when I first started coaching, and counselors and pastors and anybody who sits and listens to people's problems all day long, we have to get good at that, right? Because sometimes you hear things that just sway your whole body. Is so painful, right? And
Mhm.
if you don't learn how to let it go, you won't stand in that field very long. Social workers, teachers, all of them. You have to be mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that energy transference can come from touch too. Not just the handshake. Okay. Everybody's like, I want to shake everybody's hand because I don't want their energy. No, no.
Mhm.
It is how the person touches you. This is where we move into things like molestation and harassment and sexual abuse, or like going to a Reiki healer and being fondled. That happens for a lot of people have had that experience. The suggestive touches, the intentional malevolent touches, right? That are designed to make you feel small, that are designed to make you feel powerless. These are the type of touches that can create an energy transference. That's why so often we see that people who were molested can go into molesting others themselves. It's an energy transference, right? So yes, you can get it through touch. No, it's not a handshake. It is a specific type of touch. So don't be afraid to hug somebody, but be mindful of how they hug you back.
Mhm.
Be mindful of what they do. Think about it. I know both women and men who've been touched inappropriately and how that made them feel, right? They felt violated. They felt small, diminished. That's a negative energy. That's an energy transference. But it can also work in a positive way. And I have to be mindful. I'm always focused on encouraging people to heal and bring to the awareness the things that need to be healed. But I also have to focus on the positive from time to time, right? Energy transference can happen in a positive way too. Have you ever had somebody hug you in a way that just broke all your barriers and just made you feel like you were with grandma and grandma was baking cookies, and it was like you just felt the sun when they got through hugging you, right? A hug from the right person in the right way can just begin to heal you. As a matter of fact, there's this whole movement that was taking place at one point a couple of years ago where people were using hugs as healing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Holding a child as they're sick is a healing process. It helps
It
them to
is.
heal.
It
Helps them
is.
to heal. So energy transference can happen in a positive way also.
Mhm.
It's the intention behind the act that makes the energy transference positive or negative.
So, because of COVID, that is one thing that I think came out of it in a negative way. We got so hypersensitive to people being close and touching that we don't do it anymore as much as we used to. And so many of us feel disconnected. We feel not a part of the group or whatever because of that. So we're gradually getting back into it. But I know that was a big piece where you don't want to touch anybody, nobody came close, but we need human touch. As you
We
say,
need
it's
human
done in
touch.
the right way. Yeah.
Now, okay, so let's talk back to this energy transference, right? Through the television. we were told that direct contact with another person would cause you to get COVID. And so what did we do? We pulled back,
Uh-huh.
stopped touching, stopped doing what humans needed to do. And guess what? It diminished your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It diminished your immune system. You begin to feel lonely. You begin to feel sad. You had all these things because of the lack of connection. You begin to feel isolated, alone, and it diminished your immune system and made you more likely to be compromised by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I never stopped hugging people. I did. I'll never forget, I was in the park walking one day and this lady came up to me, craziest thing, but these things happen to me all the time. And she says to me, God told me to ask you to pray for my hand. She did, I kid you not. And she says, my hand is hurting. I don't know what's wrong with it, but God told me to ask you to pray for it. Right there in the park, I stopped what I was doing, grabbed her hand and prayed for her. We went on about her business. I didn't know this woman from Adam. A friend of mine was like, you touched her hand? That could have been a setup. She was probably trying to give you COVID. I'm like, girl, I don't have COVID. So, and guess what? Knock on wood, haven't gotten it at all. At all. But I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let it, I wasn't going to live in fear. Wasn't going to live in fear. And my granddaughter had it. That's the kill-off. She got it and was hugging me. Everything. I never got it. So that mind, that energy transference goes both ways. You can receive the negative energy or you can give the negative energy and overpower the negative energy with your positive energy. Something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on that?
Just to add, one of the things I read in it was a behavioral study that while lots of organisms, biological organisms, different species of mammals can connect, like they can transfer, like when divers save a giant blue whale that's been trapped in a net, it can live, but it's barely getting air and it's not happy. And blue whales are massive. They can kill people with their tail or a fin.
Yeah.
But like the diver would go up to the eyeball on this whale and without saying anything, just look at it, and the whale would relax, kind of knowing that the diver is going to cut the net away, even if it hurts. And sure enough, the net's been there for years and it's dug into its flesh. And then the whole pod honors the diver with the knife, celebrates and then I get really emotional. But or a dog, a military veteran coming home from the war and their favorite.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're able to transfer happiness and joy on a massive scale remotely, far apart, if we're watching the same content that triggers it. It's one of those things that it's evil or amazing.
Yes.
It's weaponized or it can heal on a massive scale, like thousands or millions of people can feel the energy and emotional transference if it's positive or negative. And it's something that's kind of unique. I don't know if all animals or plants, the oneness of all, but we have an ability to kind of communicate silently our intentions that seem to be powerful and transferable.
Oh, yeah. I used to swear I understood my dog. I could feel when he was sad and I could feel when he was concerned and happy and all that good stuff. And it's part of the reason why I don't have a dog now, because when they're in pain, I feel it. And if I can't do anything about it, and anybody who's had a dog, animal that they love, they know, they can feel that they're connected, right? Yeah. So, all right. I'm perplexed because we are at 7:45. We're already over time. I really do want to talk about the dark night of the soul. If y'all can hang with me for like 10 more minutes, I'll cover it. But it's okay. All right. All right. It's going to take me a minute. So we talked about trauma. We talked about energy transference. We talked about demons and how it's created in our minds. We talked about limiting beliefs, limiting thoughts. There is a point where you have what is called an awakening, right? And for many, and this is an ugly slide, but hey, for many, it is called the dark night of the soul. And then other people say spiritual awakening. We had a conversation about the conscious mind, right? And how the conscious mind produces information. But sometimes our conscious mind is not being the gatekeeper. Is most times, let me just say this, most times our conscious mind isn't being the gatekeeper, is not interpreting because we're not tapped into it, we're disconnected. Trauma can cause the spirit to leave the body temporarily and just hover slightly above them, that's what they say. But basically it's kind of like we're zombie mode. We're just walking through life. We're not interpreting and experiencing, we just hear, right? And we get fed all this information. We have all these experiences. We don't feel like we have any power. We don't feel like we have any control over anything that's happening to us. We are just the victim. The dark night of the soul comes when it's time to change. When so much outside stuff has polluted the inside that the I am, that spirit inside of you says, enough. We can't live like this anymore. We can't do this anymore. We're killing ourselves. This is where the real challenges begin. Now, a lot of people say, oh, spiritual awakening is so great. It depends. It depends how strongly connected you are to your beliefs and limiting thoughts and the world being a particular way, and that dualistic mindset that we've talked about, is how challenging it is to go through the process of awakening. Because the process of awakening is like having everything that you've ever known to be true, believed to be true, thought of yourself challenged and thrown out the window and being left to see, or throwing cooked spaghetti on the wall and seeing what will stick. Matter of fact, let me not say it was thrown out the window. It's like pulled out of you, put in the fire, right? And to see what doesn't burn up. That's a spiritual awakening. What is true, what is real, what is worth having always sticks. Now, why is it called the dark night of the soul? Let me give you a little history lesson. The concept of the dark night of the soul was first coined in a poem by a man named St. John of the Cross. He was a 16th century Spanish mystic and poet. The idea of a spiritual depression is part of many different spiritual and religious teachings, including Buddhism, where it is referred to as falling into the pit of the void. According to Anna Ucine, Dr. Anna Ucine, who is a psychiatrist and the author of Fulfilled, How the Science of Spirituality Can Help You Live a Happier, More Meaningful Life, the dark night of the soul is essentially any time when our darkness comes to the forefront. It is as if we are doing everything we can to stay afloat, and it seems as if the universe, the world, and life is against us. She goes on to add that the dark night of the soul will often involve suffering, setbacks, and obstacles. She says that nevertheless, oftentimes the dark night of the soul is a necessary part of people's spiritual evolution. This term is used to describe what one could call a collapse of perceived meaning in life, an eruption into your life of a deep sense of meaninglessness. They go on to say that it's an inner state in some cases. This inner state in some cases is very close to what is conventionally called depression. Nothing makes sense anymore. There's no purpose to anything. And sometimes it's triggered by some external event, some disaster, or on an external level. The death of someone close to you could trigger it, especially a premature death. For example, if your child dies, or you had built up your life and given it meaning, and the meaning that you had given your life, your activities, your achievements, where you are going, what is considered important, and the meaning that you have given your life for some reason collapses. It can happen if, and this is an interesting statement, if something happens that you can't explain away anymore, some disaster which seems to invalidate the meaning that your life had before. And really, what has collapsed then is the whole conceptual framework for your life, the meaning that your mind had given. And so what results is a dark place. But people have gone into it. And then there is the possibility that you emerge out of that into a transformed state of consciousness. Life has meaning again, but is no longer a conceptual meaning that you can necessarily explain. Quite often it's from there that people awaken out of their conceptual sense of reality, which has collapsed. Okay, I stumbled through that. The sentences were a little cumbersome. So let me just sum it up for you. You define your life by all these things, right? Who I am looks like my job, my role in my family, my associations, my knowledge and ability, my wealth. Wealth is a big piece to this, right? And something happens, the people I know, right? Something happens and that stuff falls apart. You lose your job. You no longer can find work in the field that you loved, right? You have a strong identity in the work that you do. And now it's taken away. You identify yourself as a wife and mother, or a husband and father, and you go through a divorce, and you no longer get to see your children, right? And because that was so much a part of your identity, you don't know what to do with your life. Or someone who was the cornerstone of your family, your mother, your father, grandparent, passes away. And they were the ones who kept you stable. And now you have no one to go to. Or you relocate. And you relocate to a place that's not familiar to you. You have no friends. You have no associations. And life gets hard. You wonder, what is the meaning? What is the purpose? This is like, the reason I talk about the dark night of the soul is because this is like the trigger of all triggers. It is the trigger of all triggers. And the reason I call it the trigger of all triggers is because, like I said, triggers are a call to heal. The dark night of the soul is just that. It is a call to heal. It's a call to grow. It's a call to change, to modify the way that you've been doing things your whole entire life. And it's going to feel painful. Why does it feel painful? Not because you're never ever unsafe or anything is tormenting you, but because the subconscious mind is built upon maintaining life as it is. The dark night of the soul is a call to newness, and newness is often scary. The dark night of the soul is a call to evolution, and evolution is scary. You can no longer be who you were. You can no longer do things the way that you used to do things because they no longer work for you. And that is the dark night of the soul. And it is important to this conversation around healing the subconscious because the dark night of the soul comes as a surprise to most people, simply because we don't make the conscious decision to continue to grow, to continue to evolve. We say we have arrived, and that's all there is, right? So we can be proactive and avoid the dark night of the soul for the most part. And even when it is encountered, it doesn't have to be so hard if we are aware the fact that it's an opportunity to learn more, to grow more, to do more, to be different, to be more than what we were in the past. Yeah. It's like the universe just says, it's time to change. And law of attraction kicks in and says, let us send things that will make this person change. It does. There are plenty of people who sit in jail right now who would attest to this fact. And think about how many people come out of jail transformed.
Yeah.
Their lives, they don't even act the way they used to. They're much more peaceful people because they've learned some things by going through that experience. Yeah. This is the dark night of the soul. And this is the calling of the dark night, to change, to evolve. I know everybody makes it sound so mystical and it's scary and it's dark. You see the picture, it looks like it's the darkest thing in the world, but it's just a process. And the more readily we embrace that process and ignite our own healing, the easier it'll be. The more readily we are to let go of what we think is true and embrace the possibility of something different and new, the easier this will be. Yeah. I once worked with a girl who was going through this, and it was rough. But the reason it was rough for her was because she had all these notions, and it was spiritual. Most of her stuff was around spiritual trauma. Spiritual trauma is one of the hardest things to heal from, because true healing is of a spiritual nature. And to deal with a spiritual teacher or a healer or somebody like that, you've got to get over your hangups about spirituality. And so everything that she knew and believed was challenged. And it was hard. She had some mixed up things in her background where it's kind of like spiritual awakening for someone who was in the Catholic Church and abused by the priest. For someone like that, the lines in the neurological pathways are so twisted and distorted that it's almost like navigating a dark minefield to get to truth. Yeah. So the less solid the connections with these things and this understanding, the easier this process will be. The more strongly embedded into your way of thinking that you are, the harder it is. The harder it is.